You would never use a microscope to look at the stars, and yet people will often just use one divination method of choice, when in reality, different questions require different tools. Welcome to the Love Siren podcast, your weekly dose of enchantment for the modern romantic. I'm Dahlia, your queer, poly, feminist witch, guiding you into your most magnetic, irresistible siren self. If you're craving ocean deep love, delicious confidence, and results that last, you've just unlocked the right portal. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get into it. Before we get started, I really want to talk about divination and psychics and predicting the future, because I feel like I actually have a bit of a very radical take with this, in that I never actually like to divine too much into the future. Instead, I like to just kind of have my present moment reflected back to me so that way I can choose my future. And this is the way that I tend to read for my clients. And because the thing is I truly believe in multiple universes, right? The fact that when I went to the grocery store, I chose peaches instead of nectarines, there is another version of Dahlia that chose peaches, and they are living a very different life than what I am living right now in this current reality. And so any divining into the future could be something that, like, in this current reality, if you continue to follow all of the right choices, you could land in that reality, but there's such a chance that you might not do that. So it doesn't make sense to go too far into the future. On top of that, I think that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, there can be psychics who will give you a piece of information that you can kind of just lock in on and forget everything else. I do unfortunately have the perfect story. I don't want to tell you, but I'm gonna, because it's really educational. So I went to a psychic, I want to say maybe 2022, maybe 2023, and she got so much right that it was like kind of terrifying. I was seeing a new stand-up comedy teacher, and she got the person's name immediately. Stuff like that was just kind of like, there was no way that she could have known that stuff. And then she told me that I was going to meet somebody who was a bit younger than I was, and who was going to just kind of be very obsessed with me, and just very in love with me. And he was going to have a G or a J name. And that always kind of stuck in my head. Because this woman got so much else correct, I was kind of like, well, obviously this is going to happen. And my dear friends, my dear wonderful listeners, I did not meet a JG name. My current partner is indeed 4 months younger than I am. He does not have a single G or J in his name. And when I was feeling avoidant attachment with him, I was seriously thinking about this psychic and almost ended things with him, because I was like, well, there's going to be another person that's going to show up that fits all of the same criteria that this man is fitting, but he's going to have a GJ name. Which is so silly. This is why I didn't want to tell you. It's something that I really notice in my clients, where when they get a psychic reading, they'll latch onto something negative that the psychic said, and they think it is law. They think it is inevitable that it is going to become true. And unfortunately, from my perspective, somebody who really understands the brain and the law of attraction, it is going to become true, because they're so fixated on it, and they're just kind of leading themselves towards that. I had an idea for a podcast episode that I'll probably never do, which is this concept of how do you build self-awareness. And I just feel like the people who are listening to this podcast probably don't need those lessons. But I do think that there is something to be said for taking radical responsibility for your life, your morale, and your future. And I think that that is the main thing that I want you to really take into consideration as you are moving through and learning about divination and trying to figure out these patterns for yourself. Because the human brain is so stinking smart. It's so much smarter than we give it credit for. And I really do think that a lot of what divination is pattern recognition. We are receiving this information through symbols, and then we are translating that into information, whether it be for ourselves or for people that we are reading for. And before we dive into the specifics around divination, I really want to talk about how it is so important to ask exceptional questions. And what I mean is, like, I want you to put on the archetype of a lawyer. I want you to ask ironclad questions, because if you just say, should I eat chocolate today? Your guides, your subconscious, your intuition is not going to be able to give you as good of an answer as, is it in my highest good for me to eat chocolate today? Because honestly, the answer might be yes. Maybe you're low on magnesium. Maybe you deserve a little treat for working so hard. But the should is not going to give you that answer, right? Every piece of you is going to be like, well, yeah, I mean, you can do whatever you want. I also really love to ask, is the energy aligned if I... And of course, as previously mentioned, I personally don't do any kind of timeline divination. So there are so many different kinds of divination. I think that when I say that, I think people immediately think about tarot, but I'm going to be touching on not just tarot, but all of cartomancy. And I also just want to say that none of it is inherently more accurate than the others. A lot of it is just, what language do you want to use and what tools do you have at your disposal? So instead of structuring this podcast into different kinds of divination, I actually want to structure it into different kinds of answers. So we're going to start off with a very simple yes, no. So the very first thing that I would recommend is a pendulum. I have a lot of pendulums. I love them. If you listen to Meet My Spirit Squad episode, you know that I have a pendulum for a bunch of different things, one including my business. I love being able to communicate to my business with my pendulum. That being said, it does not need to be a crystal hanging from a chain. You can use a necklace. You can use your keys. If you go into your storage closet and you find a washer and a piece of string, you can use that. We basically want anything that can swing. And there's a lot of science behind pendulums, which I obviously am a huge nerd for. Our subconscious will try to communicate with us through those micro movements to make the pendulum move. Now, as I have said a million times, I am a very grounded witch. I do believe in those micro movements. However, my pendulum has also gone absolutely insane to the place where I cannot imagine me doing a micro movement would cause it to like hit my wrist. So I do definitely think that there is some outside forces at play, but there is science behind it as well, which I love. We love the marriage. And it can be a little challenging to find the right pendulum for yourself. So definitely just keep going, keep trying them, keep seeing what is around. Because my first pendulum did not really want to talk to me. And I think that I was not super attracted to this because of that. And now I have like 5 and they all respond so intensely to me. So as you are using your pendulum of choice, it's really important to calibrate it. So I would always start with show me yes, show me no. And I personally really like to ask yes or no questions for it. So for example, did I drink coffee today? Am I wearing my mermaid dress? Am I wearing red lipstick? That kind of thing, to kind of just see what it says. Because I feel like it's very easy for it to just be yes or no. Again, having energetic hygiene is very important here. We want to make sure that we are grounded and that we're not frantic. And also, I've seen this happen, and so I just want to just say it, that if you are asking your same question 25 times and you get no, and then on the 26th time you get yes, Ah, that's not how you use a pendulum. Okay, the next yes or no would be coin flipping. And I love coin flipping because there's a lot of psychology behind it. And really, the thing that I want to stress is of course, you can assign heads for yes, tails for no. But the more important thing to really notice as you are doing coin flipping is when it is in the air, what are you hoping it's going to land on? And then when it lands, how does that feel? So it's not a matter of, oh, it's tails, it's no. It's more a matter of how do I feel about that no? Because maybe, just maybe, that no is giving you a signal to ignore it. Okay, we're going to be a little sneaky and move on to dice divination. And dice can be used for yes or no. So you can have it be odd numbers mean no, even numbers mean yes, and that can be for any style dice at all. But if you have a traditional six-sided die, I would also love for you to experiment with intensity. So for example, maybe you are asking, how intense should I be on this workout? And if you get a 1, then it's like, maybe you just go for a nice walk. But if you get a 6, it's like, no, it is time. Do a HIIT workout. Let's go. Another example is when you're taking into consideration your self-care. There's 2 different kinds of self-care. One is like the very classic bubble bath, face mask kind of self-care. But then there's also the like, I know I need to do this thing that I don't want to do that I've been putting off for months and I just need to do it. And I feel like dice divination is great for when you have a spare evening and you're not sure and it's so tempting to just watch a movie and rot on the couch. But maybe, just maybe, you need to push yourself and do the thing. And who knows, maybe it's only going to take you 15 minutes. Dice divination traditionally is done in 3, so using 3 six-sided dice. And you can look up the meaning for all of the numbers online. Each one has a different association with it. But I also really encourage you to make your own meanings. I always encourage you to learn the source material, so definitely learn the traditional way. However, I do think that there is something to be said as you are beginning to understand your intuition that assigning meanings might give you a bit of an extra oomph to those readings compared to just using the traditional ones. Okay, so binary tools are fantastic, especially if you're getting used to divination. It's very easy to use, a nice, clean, simple yes-no answer. But sometimes it's very helpful to start to uncover what is going on beneath the surface. And I would say that the most traditional way of doing this would be through cartomancy. Cartomancy is just the umbrella term for doing divination with cards. This includes tarot, obviously, but it also includes Lenormand and playing cards. I, very embarrassingly, thought that playing cards was cartomancy. Like, I thought that that was the term, and then tarot and Lenormand were something completely different. But no, cartomancy is the umbrella term. I honestly am not even going to bother with tarot. I think it's probably going to be its own episode, but I feel like everyone has heard of it. Everyone knows major and minor arcana. And if you don't, I'm going to be doing a whole episode about it, so just stay tuned. But I do think that not a lot of people know about Lenormand. Lenormand is really cool because instead of having 78 cards that you need to memorize, there's only 36. And they are done in a minimum of pairs, and they each start building off of each other. So unlike tarot, where there's pretty much every card is gray. Obviously, there's some cards that are much more positive than others. But with every negative card, there's a positive aspect to it. With every positive card, there's a negative aspect to it. But with Lenormand, there are straight up positive, neutral, negative cards, and all of them interact with each other. Very interestingly, Lenormand is named after a very famous French fortune teller, Marie Lenormand, but she actually didn't create the system. So after she died, it was Le Petit Lenormand, which was a deck modeled on a deck of cards that was published in 1799 called Das Spiel der Hoffnung. I am probably butchering it, but it means the game of hope. And this is a game of chance that was designed by Johann Hechtel of Nuremberg. And so it was originally supposed to be laid out in a 6x6 grid, starting with the first card, which is the rider, and ending with number 35, which is the anchor/hope. And then we have playing cards. So they showed up in Europe from the Islamic world around the late 1300s. And in the 1400s, the tarot was invented in Italy, but it was an expanded deck for a parlor game named Tarocchi. And then in the 1700s, that is when Europeans started using playing cards and tarot for divination beyond just gaming. So if you decide to grab your deck of playing cards and decide to try to do some tarot, you'll find that the hearts are translated into cups, diamonds for pentacles, clubs for wands, and spades for swords. And then each one, obviously ace being number 1, all the way to 10, and then the jack would be knight. There is no page, which is a bummer. And then queen and king, obviously. And then we have oracle cards, which don't have a set structure. I love oracle cards. And a lot of times this is where artists can really flourish because they can have whatever interpretation they want. They're not tied to the Rider-Waite deck or the Lenormand deck. Okay, so we have gone over the more standard divinations, and now I'm going to get into a little bit more of the weirder ones. And I want to be very clear that this is a bit of a petting zoo kind of episode, right? So I'm not going over the specifics on how to do it, but it is a matter of just wanting to mention them. So if there is one that I mention that piques your interest, then you can do your own research from there. I also want to mention that it is just about my birthday, which is August 7th, and I am going to be having a BOGO sale for my divinations on my birthday, August 7th, and also the Lionsgate portal, which is 8/8. And so if you purchase a divination from me between that 48-hour period, then you get an extra one for free. And so you can have this be one for you, one for a friend, or if you want to have it just be 2 for you, I won't tell anybody. I primarily do love readings for the rest of the year, but for this particular sale, I'm going to be opening up to general readings as well. And this is going to be bone divination. So if you've never gotten your bones read, this one's a really fun one to do. And if you want tarot in addition, then you can have that as well. If you're interested, you can find all of the links in my link tree in the description, or you can email me if you have any questions at all. And I'm so excited to gift this to you on my birthday. Okay, we are moving on to object-based divination. The first one is going to be tessiomancy, which is tea leaf reading. I love tea leaf reading. This was the very first divination that I was taught by my mother. And basically, you drink your cup of tea, thinking about your question, thinking about your intention, and then you will take the leaves that have naturally gone to the bottom of your cup, and you can either read the leaves there, or you can also flip the cup upside down and have it go onto a plate, and you can read the leaves that way. If you are not a fan of drinking loose leaf tea, you can also, once it gets to the bottom, so once you get like only just a little bit of liquid left, you can open up your tea bag and dump the rest of the tea out on there and then just swirl it around. And again, just think about your intention. And then from there, you'll start noticing some objects will start to kind of come to your mind's eye. So maybe, for example, you see a bird, and traditionally in tessiomancy, a bird is a very positive omen, symbolizing good news, unexpected blessings, a fortunate journey, or newfound freedom. But again, I would really encourage you to start thinking about what your definitions are first, and then look back at what the traditional meanings are. And if you hate tea, you're in luck because you can also do this with coffee grounds. Next, we have cartomancy, which is wax reading. This is especially juicy if you are a candle magic person, which I certainly am. And this is a way to look at the wax after it has dripped and start reading it. So, for example, if it is in a clockwise motion, that shows attraction and growth and a positive manifestation as the energy is coming together. Next, we have Ogham, which is 25 letters of the medieval Irish alphabet. This is traditionally carved onto wood or drawn on cards, and they correspond to a specific tree or plant. I am absolutely terrible at other languages. So I only know the English translations. But for example, we have birch, which is associated with new beginnings, purification, and change. We also have willow, which symbolizes intuition, flexibility, cycles, and the flow of water. Next, we have runes, which I think is a much more common compared to Ogham, and this is ancient Norse symbols. I would love to offer a small tip that when I was learning runes, I also specifically learned which ones were associated with Nazis. So that way I could just be aware of that as I was doing runes. It's a beautiful system, and it is absolutely garbage that it was taken over by terrible people, but here we are. The next one is one of my personal favorites, and if you are trying to increase the whimsy in your life, you must do this one, and that is aromancy, which is divination through clouds. So when you see certain symbols, when you see certain objects in clouds, just give yourself a moment to kind of think, what do I think that the cloud is trying to communicate to me? And then you can go ahead and look it up and see what the traditional meaning of it is. And then, while you're looking up at the clouds, maybe you notice a beautiful bird. And did you know that there's bird divination as well? Now, I personally have only ever seen this word written down. I've never heard it pronounced, so I'm going to apologize in advance. I think it's ornithomancy. I think that's as close as we're going to get it. I'm not going to do a take two. So this is when you start to take notice of the flight patterns of birds. So for example, if a bird is circling, then that can indicate a buildup of energy, whereas a bird flying straight can suggest a very clear path ahead. And if that bird is going really fast, then that means that like you're going to get to your destination really quick, but maybe if it's going a bit on the slow side, maybe not so much. Oh my gosh, I'm so annoyed because I feel like I'm running out of time, but I have so many cool forms of divination. So if you want to hear some other ones, please let me know. Maybe I'll do a part two. But we're going to move on to scrying. So this is looking into a reflective surface, and you soften your gaze enough to be able to start getting some symbols or colors or other kind of information. You've probably experienced this if you like go into the bathroom at night and you see your reflection in the mirror and you seem a little like monstrous or something along those lines. Like you definitely don't look like you. And so there is a lot of divination that can happen with that particular state. Scrying, of course, can include things like a crystal ball, which I think is probably the most common, but you can also do it in just a bowl of water, which, I'm all about free witchcraft. So what is more free than a bowl of water? And then you can also do flames, which is really cool because I personally don't think that there is anything more therapeutic than having a cold winter's night and really staring into that fire. And you can really get into that trance state as you are watching the fire. So it's very easy to kind of then use that trance in a very intentional way to bring it to your divination. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, but I would love to just end this on by saying the cards themselves aren't magic. The pendulum isn't magic. The crystal ball isn't magic. All of them are translators. The real magic is your ability to notice patterns, trust your intuition, and stay curious. ask yourself those questions and start reflecting on what certain things can mean. Because, like I said, divination is not about predicting the future, it's about giving you a way to have a conversation with yourself, with your intuition, with your guides, with spirit, with universe, whatever you want to call it. And then lastly, I just want to go over some mistakes that I see from beginners, which are incredibly common. The first one being buying 20 decks before you know how to read one. So if you are learning tarot, for example, I would highly recommend picking up a traditional Rider-Waite to just learn the iconography that all of these amazing, incredible indie decks are basing their art off of. But if you're learning Thoth, if you're learning Lenormand, whatever it is, just go back to that source material. Another one is thinking that one tool is objectively better than the others. I think that, again, tarot tends to be the industry standard. And so a lot of people can assume that that one is going to be the best one. But it is really just a method. And you might be tempted to ask the same question repeatedly, hoping for a different answer. I would sit with the answer that you get first before asking it again. And then lastly, I would not treat every reading as absolute fate and instead just see it as guidance for what you could do next. Okay, I think that's everything. I really can't wait to see you in my BOGO sale. I am so excited for it, and I hope that you have an amazing day, and I'll see you next week. Love you.